Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm genuinely delighted to be able to introduce this event, and one of the most important, I think, intellectual, but also political endeavors over time. Certainly, one of the most important political and intellectual endeavors that progressive thinkers, but also policymakers have been engaging with in recent years, the idea of a jobs guarantee. And what a privilege to be able to do so in the presence of three speakers that have been and currently are directly and very intimately involved with both the theoretical framing of this idea, but also with its practical implementation. We would be, I think, the non-experts such as myself will be forgiven for misunderstanding that the idea of a jobs guarantee is just the latest iteration of a long-standing normative claim of breathing life into the idea of the right to work, which as lawyers such as myself know has been recognized as a right in a number of international covenants and national constitutions for more than half a century. But it will soon become clear to our audience that while the jobs guarantee also seeks to do that, it is much more than just a normative claim. And it is in fact a fully fledged macroeconomic theory that could assist us with attaining a fairer, more sustainable and ecologically balanced future with strong elements of intergenerational solidarity and distributive justice. Our two speakers and our commentator are none less than Aurore Laluc, a French MEP and an economist, elected at the European Parliament in 2019 in the ranks of the Socialists and Democrats through the French party, the French but also European party of Place Publique. She has been involved for nearly a decade with this idea, both as an economist and as a politician. And she will explore with us, in particular, the macroeconomic dimension of the idea of the jobs guarantee. A second speaker is Rania Antonopoulou, herself also an economist, teaching and researching at Bard College and at the Levi Institute, but also former minister for combating unemployment in the progressive left government led half a decade ago by Alexis Tsipras in Greece, who at the time was in charge of rolling out a jobs guarantee program in Greece, a program which he had worked on from a theoretical point of view herself also for more than a decade. Our third speaker is Pelle Hilmersson, Pelle, the Deputy General Secretary at ETUC. Pelle is in charge of a very large portfolio at ETUC COS that includes labor market policy, economic and social cohesions, two areas that of course are deeply intersecting with the topics that will be covered in our presentations today. Pelle is of course also interested personally in the idea of a jobs guarantee. He has been following the idea in its development for a number of years now. I know that he has had the pleasure of organizing and intervening in similar events with some of our speakers today in the past, some of which I tuned in to listen to. He's extremely well placed to continue this conversation after our two speakers. Without any further ado, I would pass the virtual microphone to Aurore. Aurore, if I may, you will have about 15 minutes to give your presentations, and I'm very much looking forward to our conversation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola. It's my pleasure to be here today, and I'm a bit impressed actually. So, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm very glad to be here because, as you said, Nicola, this is an idea and a policy that I've been supporting for years, almost a decade, and just being here today to discuss it at the European level is something quite exciting. So thanks again for the invitation. I think we are in a key moment, in fact, because this job guarantee ID is gaining recognition in the public debate at the European level, but especially also in the US. And let me begin with this. Let me begin with the US. Some of you may know that President Biden asked his administration days after his arrival at the White House to make plans for a climate conservation corps modeled on Roosevelt Civilian Conservation Corps. The idea is quite simple. It's putting unemployed, but also, and I insist on this, underemployed Americans to work on project intended to, I quote, conserve and restore public lands and water, bolster community resilience, increase reforestation, protect biodiversity, improve access to recreation, and address the climate change. So this is a bold move on the part of the new president, clearly aiming with its Build Back Better plan to restore not only America's strengths, American wealth, and so on, but American prosperity. And I think that this is something that should inspire us at the European level. So we do not know yet if the CCC will be in the plan that will be announced in the few hours, but it was clearly on the table of the negotiation. In Europe, as you know, things are going a little bit slower as always. But here too, the idea of job guarantee is being discussed more and more seriously, both as a pragmatic answer to the current economic situation and as a tool, and maybe a key tool for the ecological transition. And it could also help Europe to be loved by Europeans. I mean, if we if we create jobs, if Europe has a direct impact on our daily life, then I think that the legitimacy of Europe won't be questioned anymore. Coming back to the ecological transition, the COVID-19 epidemic not only caused a dramatic economic meltdown and a rise in unemployment, but it also questioned our very economic model, highlighting the risk of a growing interpretation between the human and the animal world, which is caused by deforestation and more broadly, human activities. So in short, I think that this crisis stresses crucial need to move our economy toward a more sustainable model, because unfortunately the COVID-19 is most likely to be just a rehearsal for what's coming our way with climate change. So we need to change, and we need to change now. The time left to implement this change is now very short, according to the latest IPCC recommendation. So if we want our actions to be effective and to prevent irreversible damage for our population, this action needs to be ambition and structural. And this is why I believe that job guarantee is not only a useful tool in a time of a crisis, but it is the cornerstone of a truly transformative ecological policy. Uh, by providing a job to those who want to work, this program offers the double benefit of reducing unemployment with all of its terrible consequences, but also provides the labor force we need to change one more time to change our economies towards a greener and more sustainable model. And let's not forget that investing, for instance, in biodiversity does not necessarily require a lot of money, but it calls for a large number of workers, cleaning up the soil, planting trees, maintaining coastal areas, controlling floods, etc. All these actions are central in the protection of our environment and could be perfectly handled by the job guarantee. But, and I insist on this but, the job guarantee does not only rely on the ecological dimension. I mean, it is also, and I would say above all, meeting all the unmet needs of a society. So those needs that are not filled by the market because they are not profitable enough, and not by the state, by the public sphere, let's say. So the employment potential is almost limitless in the protection of the environment, like we mentioned before, but also in the care sector to the community, for instance, setting up tool libraries, education, care for the children, care for the elderly, and so on. And the great news is that it wouldn't even cost that much. In my country, France, an experimentation called Zero Long-Term Unemployment Initiative was launched, and it was based on a very simple idea: no one is unemployable. That was very simple. And there is, in fact, some work everywhere, but we need to create some jobs. And it is not about money. We have enough money to do it, because this experimentation shows that employment is not more expensive than unemployment for a society. And the idea is quite simple. When someone finds a job, it reduces automatically a series of costs, direct and indirect, for the society. Of course, the implementation of such a job guarantee at a larger scale would entail institutional and administrative costs that cannot be neglected, of course. And this is where I think Europe's come in.
I think we're having a connection problem with Aurore. It's one of the pleasures of online and remote working. I can think right now of some jobs that could be filled through a jobs guarantee, a Zoom in particular, but then they will have to be remunerated the market rate. Aurore, now Aurore has dropped out of the conversation, which is a shame because she was really, yes, somebody has already commented, we need massive investment in broadband in the European Union. Absolutely, Roland. Let's see if we can mend at least this part of the broadband with Aurore. Otherwise, perhaps we can have Rania Antonopoulou giving her presentation, if that's okay, and then we can revert back to Aurore. Rania, would it be okay with you to give us to share with us your presentation now, and then we can resume with Aurore whenever she joins us again?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I
Yes.
think you had also some slides that you wanted to share with us. No?
Let me say that there is a PowerPoint presentation, but I would rather not use our very valuable time.
Yeah, we're all in favor
today
of
here.
agile. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Okay.
as you mentioned these, let me first begin by thanking TUI for organizing this and for the invitation. It is a great pleasure to be with you today. I will start, I will take us a little bit back for a moment with the question of what is a job guarantee and why is it an interesting policy that us on this panel, for now at least, Aurora will come back, are asking that we pay more attention to it. So we begin with the clear observation that unemployment has been with us for ever and ever. In other words, the market system itself produces unemployment. In periods of crisis, the ranks of the unemployed swell. Then when you have expansionary periods, it contracts. Nonetheless, unemployment is with us always, and there is concern, and there have been policies in place to support the unemployed. The idea of a job guarantee is fairly simple. If in good times or in terrible times, a person is unemployed, is looking for work, but the market cannot provide one, businesses are not hiring, that the state assumes the obligation of providing one to the person that is able, willing, wanting, looking for a job and cannot find it. So there are several issues, of course, around that. So in Greece, for example, in 2014, you have roughly 1.2 million people in a population of 10 million, 1.2 million people were unemployed. Should the state assume that responsibility, which is something that we would like to see happen, is it true that we would need to create 1 million jobs? And the answer is no, because not 1 million people would want to participate in such a program. But for those that want to participate, they should not be excluded on a permanent basis from the market. And when you look at who is more vulnerable, I would say that in each country that differs. There are countries where the long-term unemployed have no chance of finding a job after 4 or 5 years without a job. In other cases, that is definitely the case in Greece. In other cases, such as in Luxembourg, for example, who are those unemployed people that desperately want a job but cannot find one? Those that are 50 years old and older. In other cases, as in Ireland, who are those people that would want to get a job by the state temporarily because they cannot find a job? Well, it's a regional problem. In some regions, they cannot find jobs, and so on and so forth. But the bottom line is that there are pockets of the population that are unemployed, are looking for work, and hence this policy recommendation says that if nothing else works, then the state must step in and provide a job. What kinds of jobs? I'll get back to that in a minute. The second important element of what is a job guarantee for us is that, as I described it earlier, unemployed people are swelling when the ranks of the unemployed when you are in a downturn, but when you have faster growth and an expansionary period, you have much less people that are unemployed and need such an intervention. Therefore, if we think about it for a minute, we will understand that should such a policy be adopted by a country, you would have something like an ebb and flow of the amount of the public purse that needs to be spent on the program, and it would be absolutely counter-cyclical, because in good times, you need to spend very little on it. In terrible times, when you have a lot of people unemployed, then that's when the need arises to increase the intervention. Therefore, it has been argued that it acts as an automatic stabilizer. If, of course, we live in a regime of ideas that says when you are in a recession, apply austerity and apply measures that will depress the economy further, such a policy would be very difficult to have the ears of policymakers and to be implementing such a policy. The automatic stabilization part is extremely important, therefore. It has been argued, actually, by both Hyman Minsky, but also by a number of scholars from Australia, for example, Bill Mitchell, from the United States, Randy Ray and Dimitri Papadimitriou and Forstater. In the 90s, they wrote extensively on these two aspects. There is a third aspect, though, to what is a job guarantee, because we want not to just spend money. It's not a cash transfer type of intervention. It is one that pays for the work performed. It is meaningful to have jobs that produce services, that produce and generate assets, dare I say, assets that are very important for the community. Whether we are talking about projects of physical infrastructure, social infrastructure, or social delivery, services, that is, the work performed should have two characteristics. One, that is meaningful work for the community itself. It responds to needs. But secondly, that it is meaningful work for those that become the workers, those employed from and within a job guarantee program. Is that possible? And I want to make a link to what Aurora was saying earlier. Yes, it is. In one intervention that we undertook in Greece, for example, afforestation and reforestation were very important. We worked very closely, Ministry of Labor and Ministry of Energy and the Environment, whereby the management of natural resources became part and parcel of the know-how that unemployed people learned. And therefore, at the end of the 8 to 10 months period that they were working these kinds of projects, they had acquired the knowledge that then becomes certified in giving skills, creating, therefore, the capacity of people to find jobs, either through very small size enterprises that now are dealing with management of natural resources, meaning in forests, or with small cooperatives that turn all the material that is collected from the afforestation into pellets, and they sell them at a very low price to the community, schools, and other public buildings. So if one is committed to this idea and understands that one intervention has positive impacts on three fronts: on the unemployed, from a macroeconomic point of view, as well as at the level of communities in terms of services and goods that get delivered, then I think it allows us to focus on it. One more word on the macroeconomic aspect. We have estimated for the case of Greece and for the case of 4 more countries that were actually undergoing deep recessionary periods, were going through deep recessionary periods, what the impacts of such interventions would be, starting from an analysis of who is likely among the unemployed to participate. So for the case of Greece, for example, in cooperation with the General Confederation of Labor Unions in Greece, the Labor Institute, we undertook a study in 2012, 2013. And what our study, through using, of course, a lot of data, showed was that should such a policy be implemented in Greece, you would have anywhere between 300,000 and 500,000 people that want to participate. So you can go ahead and cost that. How much would it cost? And then what you can do from a macroeconomic perspective is understand what would be the total impact on the economy. So you would have, through the regular working of the output multipliers, an increase in output. But let's remember, when you have an increase in output in general, you have an increase in taxation receipts from the government. But also for income that is received by people that work in the program, imagine 300,000 people, you would have this income earned being spent back in the economy, which turns out to generate more jobs because somebody has to produce the stuff that people are going to buy now. And therefore, what we discovered was that 55% of the cost of the program was self-paying through the increase in economic activity. So you have the macroeconomic impact that says for every 3 jobs you create through a job guarantee, 1 more job is being created in the private market, plus tax receipts, plus growth. It goes without saying. You have the unemployment being reduced, therefore, and you have assets that communities want, and when they see being built, they are celebrating, and therefore they are supporting the program. So this is the basis upon which advocacy is being built on the job guarantee. I think that there will be ample of time to discuss through a Q&A period. I don't know how much more time I have, but I would like to simply mention, come back to what you said, Nicola, that there is a PowerPoint presentation. In fact, there are 3 documents. There is one PowerPoint presentation that looks at the results of what we implemented as a government through the Ministry of Labor, which was a program for 150,000 people. We had to lower the ambition for a variety of reasons as we were under supervision at the time. So we have a PowerPoint that we can share with you regarding the results and the organizational aspects, the institutional aspects of the program, that in fact the International Labor Organization came in as an observer. So what you will see is not the Ministry of Labor celebrating, congratulating itself, but it is the ILO's work that actually the PowerPoint presentation is based on. At the same time, there are 2 documents, a very short note, a public policy brief, but also the entire study that we undertook at the Levy Institute, as I said earlier, in collaboration with the General Confederation of Labor in Greece, the Greek entity, in which study we detailed a lot of the outcomes, a lot of the macroeconomic implications of such an intervention, because it is clear that when you have a country that has difficulties financing its budget, the key question is how you're going to pay for it. So we thought it would be a very good idea to estimate how big the program should be for Greece, but also what the financing and what the macroeconomic outcomes would be expected from such an intervention. And therefore, it was on the basis of this study that we were called in to provide help and support to the very young government back then in rolling out such a program. We went halfway. The hope and expectation is that lots of lessons learned, because nothing is perfect. There were a lot of difficulties in doing so, although it was a very successful program, is something that other countries and other scholars can benefit from. I will stop here, and should there be questions, I'll be very happy to come in and answer them.
Rania, thank you very much. It was a fascinating presentation, and I think it's really the combination of you know, the more normative and social, but also combined with macroeconomic robustness of this this idea that it's really the big novelty, because we've had public works program in the past, but the extent to which they were approached in such a coherent way as stabilizers, I think it's really one of the many original points of this new approach that you are representing so well. Aurore, the minute your connection failed, there were a number of comments from our participants on yes, we can think of where it is that we should be investing in the future in terms of job publicly funded jobs. European broadband is certainly an area of interest, but as you were interrupted by the technical problems we had, you were speaking about the American experience and the American approach as it's developing at the moment. If you want, you can continue from there, or you can continue from any other point that you see fit.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will keep my camera off if you don't mind, because it seems that my Wi-Fi is going through very hard times, and I don't want to leave you one more time. Yeah, actually, I think that when my Wi-Fi decided to die, actually, I was talking about the Sure mechanism. My understanding is that perhaps we could fund and experiment a job guarantee with the Sure mechanism. It would be a realistic and a pragmatic way to do it. And let's not forget that the question of just transition, and more precisely, the question of the disparity between countries facing ecological transition, is absolutely central in Europe. And to be clear, the question are, how do we avoid hundreds of thousands of people working in carbon industries, especially in Eastern and Central Europe, to fall into unemployment? How do we make sure these people are offered an alternative, a training, I insist, a training and a job? And how do we make sure the social dimension is not left out the ecological transition, which is key for this success? So I do believe that one of the answer is job guarantee, and I believe this argument could be key in the keys for the job guarantee at the European level, actually. And finally, but Rania mentioned it, fantastic way, by the way. It was so good to hear the name of Dimitri Papadimitriou and Ayman Mizki today. Implementing a job guarantee at the European level would be a great way to counter the effect of our economic up and down. It's a macroeconomic stabilizer, actually. And like my friend Pavlina Chaneva really clearly demonstrated, unemployment is spreading just like an epidemic, but it simply one unemployed person throw another one out of work. Not only does it propagate in a geographic pattern, but it also inflicts severe consequences on individuals and communities. And there is also an unemployment trap. I mean, being unemployed makes you unemployed because companies are not very keen on employing unemployed people. So the cost of unemployment is not merely economic, it is also social and even psychological. Unemployment generates depression and suicides, and we know that 1 in 5 suicides is linked to job loss, according to the OECD. So this is why we need to break the vicious circle of unemployment, the one that makes unemployed people even more unemployable. And this is why we need to fight unemployment not after, but before it even happens, actually. And this is why we need to have an automatic answer to the loss of employment, a mechanism that helps mitigate the effects of economic instability. But this stabilization mechanism will not only have a positive effect for those affected by it, the benefits of such a mechanism will be for the entire community. It is basic economy, but it seems that we have lost track of basic economic rule in the past decades, and it will help to sustain the demand when we are going through hard times. So the job guarantee works as a counter-cyclical mechanism, as Rania put it, very effective in the event of an economic shock. It expands when private employment shrinks, and it shrinks when private employment expands. So I think this is really a response to the current COVID crisis, to the climate change urgency. It works both as a micro solution for unemployed individuals and a macro solution to tame the business cycles and mitigate the impact of the economic shocks. So I hope that unions will also buy and support this idea, and I hope we can implement it at the European level. But because I really do think that it could be good for the European democracy and the European legitimacy. Thank you so much, and all my apologies for this technical problem.
Not at all, Aurora. This has become a normal feature of everybody's working lives. I think we've learned to appreciate content even more these days. So thank you very much. Pelle, we are already seeing some questions emerging, but I would be inclined to give the floor to you so that you can comment and perhaps make your own, put forward some of your own questions, and then perhaps we can deal with all of them together later on. We still have half an hour, so we are relatively comfortable if we stick to the schedule. Pelle.
Thanks, Nicola. Many thanks for the invitation and for the try to organize this event. It's been very interesting to listen to Aurore and Rania. The EGC has not a position as such on job guarantee programs, but I think it's listening to to Rania, the idea is very much aligned with the priorities of the EGC, as it's about basically creating stable and decent jobs, not the least for the future digital and climate neutral economy. And I think this issue is quite timely. It's very timely, as we are in a pandemic with a very serious situation for workers, especially in some sectors such as tourism and cultural sector, and for non-standard young and female workers and the self-employed. And I would like to talk a bit first about the current crisis to set the idea of a job guarantee in context and to strengthen the rationale behind the proposal. So I think we all know that the unemployment issue is very dangerous in Europe. In November, over 4 million people on temporary contracts had lost their jobs, most of them young people. The EU unemployment overall is 16 million, up by 2 million compared to before the pandemic hit. There might be more fresh numbers, but those are the ones I have. But the point is that the unemployment figures would have been far more dramatic had it not been for the national emergency measures to support companies and workers with short-time work schemes. The sharp rise of unemployment is yet to come, that it has only been temporarily delayed. So the coming months will be crucial. It will take time for people to get vaccinated, and we see new mutations of the virus spreading fast. So lockdowns will need to continue for some time. And in order to avoid an unemployment disaster in Europe, I believe member states need to continue with their emergency support measures, with employment protection and income compensation until a real economic recovery is underway and employment has stabilized. And these measures should cover all categories of workers, including precarious, non-standard and self-employed. And to support national job retention schemes, the EU instrument SURE has been quite important. Also, this instrument should be prolonged as long as necessary. And when the crisis is over, we should evaluate if we should make SURE more structural, meaning that it will be ready to be used next time there is a crisis. And maybe, as Jorge mentioned, it could be used to support job guarantee programs. There's also need to further discuss the creation of an unemployment reinsurance scheme in the Eurozone, open for all member states, which could help countries to stabilize their economies in the face of serious economic shocks. I mentioned the vaccinations, but vaccinations alone won't solve the unemployment crisis that risk facing us in the longer term, especially for the, as I mentioned, low-skilled young people and already long-term unemployed. So we need to think more long-term about sustainable and inclusive policies, investments supporting climate action, digital transformation, and social fairness. When we come back to more normal economic activity, the jobs need to be of high quality, not precarious, because it's not sustainable, neither economically nor socially. So we should focus more on the creation of climate-friendly jobs with just transition, a job creating industrial transformation to achieve zero carbon emissions. And we also need more jobs in health, education, and other public services. And here the EU recovery package with the MFF and Next Generation EU will be important, and the implementation of the recovery plan needs to be done quickly. But another important policy tool for recovery in the long term is the European Pillar of Social Rights, which includes, for instance, the principle of active support to employment and principle of minimum income. And the issue of job guarantee programs could be raised in the context of the action plan on the implementation of the social pillar, which the Commission presented recently, and it's the main focus for the Social Summit in Porto on the 7th and 8th of May. I believe one fundamental aspect of a job guarantee would be the focus on the quality of work, on decent work. EGC has developed a definition of quality works and jobs, which encapsulates 6 points. So good wages, work security via standard employment and access to social protection, lifelong learning opportunities, good working conditions in safe and healthy workplaces, reasonable working time with good work-life balance, and trade union representation and bargaining rights. So these factors or elements should be taken into account when developing a job guarantee. I mentioned earlier the situation of young people at the labor market because many of them are affected heavily by the current crisis. And with the unemployment we now see, there is a risk that a whole Corona generation never will set a firm foot at the labor market. And that will be a disaster. So we need something radical to happen. And I think a job guarantee is such a radical radical idea that needs to be discussed and developed. There is already the European Youth Guarantee. And I believe that there are some important lessons that could be learned from this. It's been implemented now for 8 years. And of course, the Youth Guarantee addresses the problems of a specific group, while a more general job guarantee focuses on broader groups of the labor force. But still, I think there are some valuable lessons. As you know, the Youth Guarantee is committed, it's a commitment by all EU member states to ensure that all young people under the age of 25 years receive a good quality offer of employment or continued education or apprenticeship or traineeship within a period of 4 months of becoming unemployed or leaving formal education. And the components of the scheme which provide for the guarantee are the pledge to respond to the needs of the participants to the program within a maximum period of 4 months, since the young person is registered as unemployed and the quality offer. And these elements should be considered for job guarantee programs to prevent lock-in effects associated to precarious employment and to avoid the scarring effects of long-term unemployment. And it's worth noting that a number of independent evaluations of the Youth Guarantee have confirmed the problems reported also by the EHEC member organizations, such as the low quality of the offers provided, the challenges to provide a timely offer within the 4 months, the poor outreach strategies to offer the Youth Guarantee program to those young people who have the greatest difficulty to enter the labor market, the ones furthest away from the labor market. And in some of the member states, more than 60% of the Youth Guarantee interventions consist of only of the offer of a traineeship program. So these shortcomings should be avoided towards the design and implementation of job guarantee programs. And of course, a meaningful participation of social partners at cross-sectorial and sectorial level would be key for its success. So to conclude, I would like to address the scope of this initiative and some potential positive effects. The EHEC, as I said, doesn't have a position yet, but I believe that it could be used as a tool to promote and facilitate a just transition by providing employment opportunities to workers in sectors where activity is not compatible with the meeting of the EU's net zero carbon economy, and by placing these jobs in activities which are aligned with this new sustainable model. I think also a job guarantee could act to stabilize the economy. We've heard this from Rania. It could have a positive effect on growth by providing more people with a job and income to consume and pay taxes, basically, leading to more investments. It was also very interesting to hear from Rania the positive impact the job guarantee could have on the private sector. That's of course very important. And a final point from my side, I think the job guarantee idea puts in focus the role of the state. What is the role of the state in the future? Well, I think we all can agree that the pandemic has shown the need for a strong society, a strong welfare state, strong public sector with public services and jobs, quality jobs. So I think the role of the state would be one of the most important issues to be discussed post-COVID, and the job guarantee could be a part of this, an important part of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pelle. You have really teased out some very important aspects of these proposals, but also framed some of the confines, the boundaries that ETUC would set if this engagement were to become the kind of engagement that leads to considering more closely this kind of proposals. Could I suggest that perhaps we have first a short reaction from both Rania and Aurore to the points that you've made, for a couple of minutes, 3-4 minutes, and then we've had a number of questions that I will try to bring to your attention, and perhaps try and organize in a way that is as efficient as possible. So maybe Rania, you could react first, then Aurore, so that we change the order. Well, the order changed by itself, but there we are. Rania, you have to unmute yourself.
Yes, one second. I'm there. Okay. So very pleased to hear Pelle with these positive messages. And the positive message from my perspective is that, in fact, trade unions, in my view, are, and I hope will be, key drivers to the public debate that ought to take place yesterday, but today or tomorrow is also very welcome. In fact, one thing that we must avoid is to equate the job guarantee and the provision of a job opening for the unemployed with something that is in place to fight poverty for the excluded portions of the population. In fact, we have to avoid thinking of this as a temporary program, a small type of intervention that can alleviate temporarily some pressure on the economy. It is a reorientation, actually, of the role of the state, as rightfully Pelle put it. It is an obligation, and whether one looks at human rights or looks at the pillar of social rights within the European context, there are opportunities where this idea of the job guarantee, this policy, has to enter the dialogue as the means of implementation, because we set targets, we include a number of even resolutions that member states promise to abide by, but then we fall short on the means of implementation. So when we have this issue of supporting employment, how are we going to do this? The standard practice until now and has been through activation policies. And there is nothing wrong with activation policies as long as the key issue is not lack of demand on behalf of companies. If lack of demand takes place because the right skills are not there, then what you do is what I'm very proud to say we did in Greece, because the job guarantee small scale program that we rolled out included the optional, so you don't force it upon people, upon workers, the optional participation in IT courses that provided training and certification. So we can combine, we can think creatively and with an open mind, where in fact there is a sharing out of the obligation towards the labor force between the state through tax collection, but also the labor unions have to play a very big role in that. For that, what we found was very important is a tool that we developed, and that was the diagnostic mechanism of labor market needs. And that is not only from the perspective of the employer and what the employer needs, it is also what the employees, what workers need. What are the jobs that have a future in terms of them being identified as decent jobs? And what additional skills and requirements are needed in order for those decent jobs to become even more attractive for the labor force and simultaneously to respond to the needs of the market. So it is in fact, a tripartite discussion that we ought to have, because there are benefits, but there are costs. There are winners, but there are losers by introducing such a policy, because, and I will end with this comment, in fact, what such a policy does is, I said it earlier, places a floor not only on wages, but also on the minimum social rights that we think constitute decent work. And I was extremely pleased to see Pelle identify for us one more time what are those elements, because I can say 5 out of 6 we managed to push through in Greece with this intervention that we had.
Rania was the 6th one that was missing, if I may ask.
I'm not going to tell.
Okay. We can probably have a follow-up conversation because I'm really curious. Aurore, you have 3, 4, 5 minutes just to react, and then we have quite a few questions. So that's great. I'll do my best to relate them.
Yeah, actually, I don't have a lot to add because Rania said mostly everything, and I fully agree with what Pelle said. Just a couple of points, maybe. Yes, social partners need to be on board, of course, and they need to be the key driver, as Rania put it. In France, with the experimentations that we have, things are working this way. There is a kind of a meeting with local authorities, with trade unions, and with enterprises, with the private companies, and they are trying to define together what are the unmet needs, what they need at the local level. And then they define the job offer. But you can see that this is something that cannot be done without local authorities, NGOs, enterprises, and of course, trade unions, and especially if we think about it at the European level. So yes, of course, we definitely need unions on board. I agree also mostly with everything, but also with Pelle when he's talking about the social pillar, the pillar of the social right. I mean, we're gonna have a child guarantee, so I think maybe we can have also a job guarantee, and it comes also to rethink what Pelle said, also the way our state is working. I mean, we've got in almost every international text the idea that everyone has the right to have a job and so on, but there is no effective right. Now we need an effective right. So this is the next step, and I think it's time to have this next step. Okay, donc so yes, definitely agree with what Pelle said and Rania said, and since I need to go in a couple of minutes, and I just fear that my Wi-Fi dies again. Just want to say one word. I just read a comment on the impact of a job guarantee on minimum wage. Well, actually, there is all this debate around the inflation on the job guarantee, but I'm sure that Rania will explain it in a perfect way. But anyway, there is some good and some bad inflation. And the inflation we need in Europe is inflation of wages. We definitely need it. Our economic area was built in a very deflationary way, and it's very bad for the workers actually. So there is a type of inflation that we do not need, and there is a type of inflation that we need. And inflation of the wages, yes, we definitely need it. I think this is my point of view actually. So, and if I have to leave, I just thank you so much for this invitation. I hope we will keep on the good work on the job guarantee.
Thank you, Aurore. That's most definitely our intention, but thank you very much for your insights and for your presence. I have noted down a couple of questions. What I'll do, I'll quickly set them out, and Rania and Aurore, if you're here, feel free to interact. So the job guarantee and European policies is, I think, the first thing. Retrofitting an existing program, adapting an existing program. So which one, or should it be a completely new priority?
Well, we have, as Pelle said earlier, we have quite a bit of experience by now with the youth guarantee. So we know what the difficulties were on that. And one can intervene, can find a pathway through the youth guarantee, which is expanding the idea of the guarantee. You see, the precedent that has been set is that we recognize there is a cohort of potential workers or of first entry workers that face difficulty integrating into the labor market. And the recognition is there that something should be done about it. So if I expand that idea and I look at those that are 50 and over, or other populations, it depends on the country, as I said earlier, migrant populations, there are a variety of populations where we will see that the unemployment rates are extremely high. For example, take a country exactly like Luxembourg, where you would have 2% of unemployment, and then you look at over 50 and you go to 17 and 18%. So one needs to begin with the idea that the European level agreement existed for a guarantee, and therefore who needs to have access to such guarantees. Now, the whole discussion, I want to come back to what both Aurora and Pelle said on it is time for us to enter, to push for specifically the job guarantee. You see, the job guarantee has to come in as, I mentioned it earlier, means of implementation of a prior agreement, of a prior priority that has been established already. So we say we need to have these targets, we need to support employment. Okay, how are you going to do that? So what are the rights of the unemployed? This has to be coupled, I believe, and the Institute of Trade Unions, that is hosting us today, is placed very well, because it takes not a lot actually to do the same, to replicate the study that we did. What is the cost, and for how many people are we talking about? Each country has its characteristics, but it can be done. 3 types of data that exist at the European level, and you got your numbers. So are we talking about 100,000? Are we talking about 1 million people? What percent of GDP does it take? So first, we need to have not only the wishful thinking of we would like it to be there, but to come in strongly with an instrument that says this is how much it's going to cost, and this is how much you get back, by estimating very clearly the economic cost and the benefits to such a program. Therefore, I would come back again and again to the means of implementation. How are we going to do it? And who is going to become the driver for putting up front the terminology from a youth guarantee to a job guarantee for Europe?
Thank you, Rania. I have a few more questions. One is on remuneration, jobs guarantee, minimum wage, living wage, market rates, or collectively agreed wages. And I think that is one that looks like a casual question, but it has important implications for your macroeconomic infrastructure and framework.
The way it has been advocated until now is at minimum wage. The idea has been always that you don't want the minimum wage policy of a country to be dictated by the job guarantee. The job guarantee has a different agenda. Part of it is to safeguard the conditions that are acceptable for employment. But if national legislation says this is the minimum wage, you have to go by it. And then the labor movement and other movements have to push not for the minimum wage, but for a living wage. In other words, I would not want to load onto this type of policy the agenda of increasing the minimum wage. The minimum wage should be a living wage, but that is something that collectively we have to undertake as a process. The second thing I wanted to say, though, is that should it be adopted, and that's where the resistance comes from, then the precarious jobs, one characteristic of which is undeclared work and lower wages, those would disappear because every worker would have an out. And the mere fear of such an alternative existing out there, believe me, does discipline. You know, these kinds of low wage, below substandard wage jobs. Having said this, I want to mention something. In South Africa, COSATU, the trade union of South Africa that participated greatly in the establishment of the public works program, which then became the expanded public works that included community, the building up of community assets, service delivery for HIV patients, and so on and so forth. Dare I say also with the participation of the Livy Institute in our work. So what COSATU did was to say there had to be two minimum wages. One, the legal minimum wage for unskilled workers. The second would be plus 25% for those that have skills, be it by education or by certification. And what was also agreed was another thing that Pelle mentioned, which was upon graduation of the program, you need to have certification, the prerequisite of which come from the trade union. And those that have participated become members of the trade unions according to the professions and the skills that they have acquired during their participation in the program. So there is nothing written in stone that there will be one wage, because in fact, if you take somebody who has skills and you say you force them to take a minimum wage job, that is not right. There should be a scale, but that again is a very critical detail that needs to be negotiated once the idea is bought that yes, a job guarantee is the obligation of the state.
Rania, that's the answer is a thesis in and of itself. I have two questions. I would put them to you telegraphically. And I appreciate the answer may not lend itself, the questions don't lend themselves to a telegraphic answer. Job offers under the jobs guarantee, conditional or unconditional? So like, should it be an offer that you can refuse without any implications for other entitlements? And the second question is partly linked to this, I think. Job guarantee and universal basic income competing or mutually reinforcing?
On the first question, the job guarantee is to be gained access to only when the unemployed person demands it. There is nothing mandatory, so it is absolutely unconditional. On the second one, the universal basic income, I fail to see exactly how the connection is being made. Because the universal basic income says, I, as an employed person with a high salary, will be receiving a basic income that somebody who is unemployed with a family of 4 children is receiving. So it addresses something completely different, in my opinion. Now, nothing wrong. I may be anathema for some, even colleagues, with a universal basic income. Once we have met the social provisioning needs of society, in other words, we cannot place on a universal basic income the responsibility of having access to decent health, decent education, decent housing, decent transportation. If a country has reached the level where their budget covers these needs adequately for the entire population, and unemployment issues have been addressed, including through a job guarantee, and the budget allows for distributing some kind of surplus, not to ecological grand-scale interventions, not to improving broadband, not to other priorities that society itself has, then by all means. But it is a matter, like all policies, I think, of timing and sequencing. What comes first? So I'd rather not see them as competing, but a matter of sequencing of policies.
Yes, I think that's very clear. Rania, thank you very much. I think we need to wrap this up. If I may, I would ask Pelle to make some concluding comments, if that's okay, Pelle, to wrap up this very stimulating initiative, and I hope the start of a conversation that will accompany us. Not for too long, in the sense that it would be nice at some point not to think about this just theoretically, but perhaps a more hands-on way in the future. Thank you very much, Rania. Pelle.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Rania and Aurore. Well, I will be very brief. I think I learned a lot from this. I think it was very interesting discussions, very concrete as well. I think there's a lot to learn from different national examples, including from my own country, Sweden. I didn't mention that, but we have some experience from there. But it is, as Rania says, most of the experience is focusing on the people in need. So it's really like a labor market measure, active like labor market policy measure. Is not, there's not much more thinking behind it. While this job guarantee program it's about, you know, changing our future, changing the course of the economy, the economic model, the sustainability issues, all that. So tackling everything in the same coherent way. So I think it needs to be, the discussion on this needs to be broadened to really encompass all these challenges ahead of us. It is about creating stable and quality jobs. It is about creating a more fair and sustainable future for everyone, and it is the role of the state, as I mentioned as well. Where we have I think when it comes to the role of the state, I saw a question about what will the entrepreneurs say about this? What will the conservatives say about this? And that's the challenge, I think. And also the challenge when we talk about the EU, the role of the EU, because I don't think the EU can take over the national state. It needs to be complementary. The national state needs to be strengthened as well. And we do have member states in the European Union where the national state, the role of the state has unfortunately deteriorated. So it needs to go hand in hand. That's what I'm trying to say. It can't be only the EU, and I don't think it's enough with only national states. It needs to be complementary and mutually supportive. Sorry, it's my cat who's hungry. So that's what I wanted to say. For the ETUC, we will continue these discussions internally. We'll have an employment committee meeting within the ETUC within a few months. We will have this on agenda. Maybe I will invite Rania there as well to give a presentation. That would be great. So thank you so much from my side.
Thank you, Pelle, from us very much. Thank you, Rania.
Thank you very much. Thanks much.
Thanks to Aurore, to Sotiria, all the other colleagues within ETUI, but also outside that supported and really instigated this event. Very, very grateful. And I think to be continued is certainly a guarantee given the topic. Thank you. Bye-bye.